Alexander and Steffi, because we are competing with Nouriel Rubini. So, just so you know, upstairs. But we're thrilled that you could make it here. And we're going to spend the next 25-ish minutes or so, because Marc has to, unfortunately, make a flight, talking about the delivery world, the convenience economy that we all live in, where these days the tech-savvy can get anything and everything on demand, from groceries to laundry to medical marijuana, if that's what floats your boat. And I'm joined with Bastian, who's the founder and CEO of Postmates.
Hello.
German, lives in the Valley.
That's right.
And Marc, who started his career in the Valley, and of course, as you know, lives here, who's representing Global Founders Forum as well as Rocket, and is invested in many businesses that sort of define the delivery game. So thank you both for joining us today. So I wanted to start off by asking the question around how do you decide what the consumer really wants? So Marc, you have businesses like Delivery Hero, Eat First, HelloFresh, other businesses in the laundry space like ZipJet, where each of these businesses offer a very distinct service for the consumer. The laundry guy doesn't come with a HelloFresh box. Bastian, you offer everything from a toothbrush to my NyQuil to food. Mm-hmm. Is it one and the same thing? Are the approaches going to converge or massively diverge over a period of time? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting to think about these companies from the first use case and then a little bit backwards. So when we started Postmates, it was predominantly a prepared food company, a delivery company for prepared food. But we never wanted to build a food delivery company. From day one, we started building a logistics company. What we did is we tried to pick a use case that has a very high frequency. And I think inside cities, there's probably two use cases that involve transportation that have a very high frequency. And one of them is, getting around, you moving around in a city. And the other one, and that's at least true for the US, is access to prepared food. We eat 3 times a day. So we started with a category that has a very high frequency. Customers can form a habit around using the product. Everything that comes after that, exploring different categories, I believe is a necessity, because you need to have different demand curves on the platform in order to shape the demand that you have at any moment in time. If you think about prepared food, it has these two very distinct peaks, lunch and dinner times. And during the off-peak times, there's actually relatively low volume on the platform. But what you want to create is a platform that is busy almost 24/7. Happier drivers, happier riders, more efficiencies, faster delivery times. So for us, grocery delivery, prescriptions from Walgreens, our partnerships with Apple, all of these are additional demand curves that we lay on top to even out the demand.
But what matters more? What the consumer wants, or is it that you're thinking about building the business based on driver utilization, volume economics? For every next decision you make, is it primacy with the consumer and really what they're looking for as they browse? Or is it thinking about, look, if I'm going to have delivery guys in a certain area, I better offer them, I'm going to layer these demand curves that you just talked about. How do you make those critical decisions that you have to every day? Who comes first in your mind?
Well, I don't think there is an exclusive thinking here. I think what you can offer by layering these demand curves is ultimately you can offer a better service as any of these categories, because it will be faster, because your platform is utilized a lot more than it would be if you were to just offer a service in one category. So it ultimately is the benefit of the customer. And when we launched Postmates in the US almost 5 years ago, no other service existed. So the first couple of categories we could all pick and choose, because in the logistics space, not so much into services like laundry, etc. But when it gets to access to consumer goods, we were able to pick the first ones without any competition, really.
And you did some great partnerships too, right? Which we'll talk about later. So Marc, is HelloFresh going to start delivering laundry
I think our
and
thinking is,
hairstyling services?
Our thinking is a little bit different. We believe there's not one-trick pony, and traditionally we have been successful with sometimes having different teams and different ideas starting at a different point, and then over time, maybe they compete, maybe they merge, maybe they go into totally different directions. And I think our thinking is a little bit like Jeff Bezos in '95. He said, I could have started with electronics, I could have started with books, etc., etc. He started with books because it was a learned category, it was a standardized category. So we said delivering food, delivering laundry, clothing, etc., is something people know. It's something people are familiar with, and we just need to make sure that they order their pizza no longer via the phone, but on the internet, or better even via the app. And we need to make sure that we deliver in time, because hungry people are impatient customers. And you already start at -10. You can only lose if you don't make it in time. And every minute a customer waits longer than we told him he will wait, he gets very angry. So better get one thing really right and in time. And honestly, it is already an operational challenge to deliver pizza, sushi, burgers that don't squeeze and don't fall over while you transport them. It is a big question whether bicycles or motorcycles are better or faster. Times like today, when the weather is tough, maybe you need some cars. So create some hubs from where you deliver. So we think focusing on one team, on one category, getting that right is extremely important, and there are 1,000 operational challenges. One more point, we also think that food is the largest category and will stay the largest category. And we rather start in that category with 1 or 2 or 3 businesses and then focusing on too many other new categories. But I also admit absolutely openly that we don't know what the future will be. Will there be one company delivering all? I guess one day Amazon is going to go into this business, and then there's no question what to deliver, but can we do it better operationally than them? Yeah? So I think there's no right or wrong.
So it's all about food. $100 billion category, growing, global. How much
bigger, much bigger.
So Marc says it's all about food. Bastian, is it really all about food?
In the beginning. I would say for the first 5-6 years, it's all about food, yeah.
But we're very much still in that next...
And then maybe we will add some wine and some cigarettes, right? So some
cigarettes,
convenience.
Really, Marc?
Well, it probably will be electronic cigarettes. In the country, I mean, we are operating in emerging markets.
Right.
So cigarettes and wine and beer are still on demand. So what I mean is we will serve what the customer then wants in this broader range of category. Whether we are going to deliver a toothbrush at 2 o'clock in the morning because someone needs it in his hotel room and for whatever reason the hotel doesn't have it or whatever, or some chocolate, or someone wants something unusual, I think that's a long time.
Sebastian, what will you not do? What will you not deliver?
First of all, I give Marc another 2 years, and then he'll get to the thinking where we arrived today.
Right,
so,
okay. Did you hear that?
Time.
You're 2 years behind.
No, but...
Not behind.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit, I think a little bit maybe in the markets that you're at.
You can say what you want.
I think in the US, the category has advanced dramatically over the last 12 months. I mean, if Apple, probably one of the greatest companies that we have, is offering on-demand services, I think that shows a lot of things that are going on. So what we won't do is, I mean, look, I said it before, there is a difference between a food company and a logistics company. We did food for 4+ years, and I think we learned almost anything there is to learn about logistics in that category. But it is my fundamental belief that there is a shift happening in societies, and maybe it starts in the US, and that is that there is a new form of e-commerce developing, and that is the instant access to goods. Call it the Uberization, because Travis and Uber did a great job at teaching us that you can press a button and something arrives. But I'm not sure if that will be the biggest category in e-commerce. It doesn't.
You mean transportation?
Well, no, instant access to
Instant
goods.
access,
It doesn't have to be, by the way. For it to be a very interesting category, it doesn't have to be the biggest, right? There can be large companies in that space without it being the dominant part.
But I think it will be natural.
Yeah.
It will be natural that if you order something online, e-commerce, m-commerce, that you receive it the same day.
Yeah.
Same day is very different within an hour.
Actually, it's not really.
It's not?
For me, again, it's the first step, and then in 2 years or maybe 3 years, it's within an hour.
But your SLA is an hour, right?
Look, I mean, again, when you start, you pick the things that you want to be great at, right? We pick prepared food and we set in under an hour. It would be silly to get the burgers after 2 or 3 hours, right? The reality is we do it in 24 minutes. It's the average food delivery time in New York. It's 31 in San Francisco. Our fastest product delivers in 9 minutes. So that's pretty good. But again, if the logistical layer exists, if really what you're writing is a software that manages loosely coupled workers from a warehouse to a store to a fleet of people, then you can apply that to a longer SLA. The SLA with Apple is, I believe, 2 hours. We can have already scheduled SLAs, groceries in the evening during off-peak times, et cetera, et cetera. So to us, it is the same. I think the right way to look at it, at least for Postmates, is what are the things that we can move in a city? So we're interested in local merchants, local infrastructure, because it's my dream to build an anti-Amazon and to help local, I'm laughing too.
Giving back to the city.
Yeah, giving back to the city, supporting local merchants is extremely important because I don't want to live in a world where I just walk in a store and all there is an Amazon touchscreen. You know, I have friends that work in retail. I want the 10,000 stores we have in San Francisco to be there and in other cities as well. And I believe the only way to do that is to give retail better tools to compete with companies like Amazon. They need to have better access to sell, and they need an infrastructure that can help them do that.
And I totally buy that, but retail is detail, and you're enabling detail, and it's about getting it right. It's about a beautiful consumer experience. You're in 40 markets?
We're in 200 cities in the US, 40 geographical markets.
200 cities?
Yes.
How do you get that right?
I don't think we have it right yet. So, I mean, we're still figuring most of the things out. And the reason that we're still figuring most of this stuff out is because there is no playbook that we can look at, right? There is none. For what we're doing, most of it has not been done before. And I think the same is true with Marc and a few of the great companies that he invested in or that they're building in the countries that they're doing it. There is no playbook. And this is why it's great. We don't know how to capture all the inventory yet. But the reality is nobody knows. So it's totally okay to find it entertaining that we want to get there. It's a huge challenge. So throwing our head in the ring, we'll figure it out while we go.
And I wanted to get to this later, but since we're talking about it, how do you think about the geographical boundaries in such a local business? You've dealt with that with Delivery Hero, HelloFresh, some of the Rocket businesses. So I'm going to come at this differently. Historically, Rocket's created some great businesses, really in emerging markets, where you're sort of skipping entire generations. There's no legacy, there's almost no incumbent, and you're kind of teaching people how to shop. Yet with some of these convenience economy businesses, and you alluded to this, where it's the US is ahead, you've actually launched HelloFresh aggressively in the US, correct? And I know that, Bastian, you announced at TechCrunch Disrupt that you think you're coming to London, but we talked about 40 markets, 200 cities, so difficult to get it right, but you're yet setting your sights international. There's a question in there somewhere. How do you think about international? How do you think about international? Is emerging markets the place for you guys, other than for the convenience economy? For you, is it really the US only and a bit more a la maybe London? How are these markets going to work out for you, and how are you going to make the decision?
I'd love to be in some of the markets where Marc is, but he did such a good job at like penetrating huge parts of the world. So, look, since I'm German, I was always questioning the strategy of US founders not to come to Europe fast. And now...
Not to,
right? Facebook took a long time. A lot of really successful companies took a long time. And so there's
But that's changed. Airbnb, Uber, anyway.
Just to a certain degree it did. But now that I'm living there and I'm thinking about the same challenge, it is a very, very big market that for a lot of things.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're relevant. It's okay.
I lost my train of thought.
No, it's a big market. You were saying it's a big market.
It is an advanced market.
Yeah.
So it is fun to do things. The adoption rates are very high. You have access to first-class technology. The penetration of smartphones was very high, of iPhones was very high.
Sure.
So the App Store was there. There were just a lot of things that were in place that allowed us to grow very fast and to try things out. So that's why we started in the US. Plus, it's also really big. And there is no internationalization from country to country. Now, we want to be in the UK. I live there. I think it's a great market. And I also don't believe that incumbents have it locked down. So I see an opportunity there.
Geographies.
Well, let me state that our companies don't start in emerging markets because they want to or we think this is the best place to be. Yes, we think it's a very, very good place to be because, as you mentioned, there's little competition, little access to capital, often very few competing entrepreneurs, et cetera, and huge demand with huge countries and populations. And yes, to some extent, they are not as developed as the so-called developed world, but when it comes to convenience and simple daily services like food delivery, they have the same demand, and we're not talking about super expensive items. We're talking pizza, burgers, and if it comes more expensive, sushi. So we talk about affordable items. So emerging markets are fantastic markets for us. At the same time, of course, we look at the big European markets. We look at Singapore and Hong Kong. We look at Dubai and the Emirates. We look at the US whenever possible. And whenever possible means for us that there's a competition that is not too strong, that there's not too many companies and too much capital chasing the same idea. I mean, the original idea of Rocket was always, let's go where the US guys and the US funds are not, meaning not the US. If we can do something in Europe, because that's clearly our home turf, let's do it here. And we have done it. I mean, Delivery Hero is here, HelloFresh is here, Foodora, the competitor of Deliveroo, is here. So, of course, we do it. But at the same time, we think don't neglect the emerging markets because they provide such a huge opportunity. If we could choose, we would have started in the US also with all our ventures, but it didn't, and it doesn't make sense for many of them because we rather fight battles we can win in large markets, attractive markets outside the US. And picking up what Bastian said, yes, the US has traditionally been very weak and slow in internationalization. Their first country always was the UK because they thought and probably still think it is so similar to the US, and it's not. I mean, everyone who is operating in the UK knows that it is a different market. And they have always had, they were very afraid of entering the continental European market and certainly going to Latin America, Southeast Asia, or even Africa. So that was the rationale behind us. I wouldn't say that our companies and our services can't win in the US. I can tell you from my own experience that in 2020 hindsight, we would have not merged with Groupon, the big 800-pound gorilla in the US. We would have gone to Chicago, would have rented the skyscraper next to their skyscraper, probably hired their best salespeople, and would have built the same business in the US and probably more successful. Because I know from my own experience, we fixed their US operations with our knowledge and experience and our people. So I can only encourage Bastian to
stay in the US.
Stay in the US and focus on the US. I'm not afraid of him coming to Europe or us competing one day.
Right.
But I can, again, only say the operational challenges in the delivery business, not only food, the same goes for any other category, are enormous. And if I would have 200 US cities to conquer and to...
That's where you'd stay.
To win and to dominate, because yes, I think you said this earlier, I think in this market, you will, for each city, you will have only one, maximum 2 players.
Okay, so you think the winner takes all is not global, it's not country, it's
No, I don't think it's not
per
global
geo.
because the operational challenge is just too humongous
Yeah.
so that you can be everywhere at the same time. And therefore, I think it's
Unless
very
you can raise
important.
12 billion.
You're not even
Well,
that, I think.
even look at Uber. I mean,
I'm looking at them.
they are
It's looking
doing
like it's going pretty
everything.
well.
They even try to go into the food business. They started Ubereats. Of course, we follow it closely, and they have some, but they are not delivering food. They have a small selection of dishes they offer, and you can order from them, and then you get that in time. But that's something different than every day being able to choose from 8,000 restaurants.
So you're not worried about Uber Eats?
I have a lot of things to worry about every day.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you something else that you might be worrying about. We've all benefited, many of us in the room, certainly we have with many of the businesses we funded, from what I would call relatively benign capital markets. Everyone's slightly worried. Let's see how the market evolves. We have Nouriel Roubini probably sort of calling it gloom and doom. What happens if the capital tap starts to get turned off? Do you do things very differently, just a little bit differently, or not at all?
I mean, you can answer from a VC perspective. I think that would be fun. So fundraising for us at Postmates, fundraising for us has never been easy.
Has never been easy?
Never been easy, no.
Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Postmates is also still very, 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 very fairly valued at just around $500 million. I had a hard time because I'm German, and we had a hard time because we didn't know anybody. We had a hard time because we started a business that nobody understood. There was no number 2 at the time we raised our Series A, so you can imagine that the term sheets looked way different than they would look if there are a number 2 or number 3 in the market. In 2013, people clearly were still questioning if somebody wants to have anything delivered in under an hour, you know, and so I could continue telling that. What we did right from I tried to build a business in the US that has kind of the American way of starting it up, but like
the German way of
running it. So, and what that means is like when 2 years ago we started talking about in our VC meetings, which probably hurt us in hindsight, but if what happens right now is true, it probably works out in our favor. We started talking about margins versus the absolute excess of growth months over month. And I mean the difference between 20% months over month and 30 or 35% months over month. So I'm talking about growth that comes to the price that it eats your margins, because the belief always has been you got to grow super fast and then you can do whatever you want. So we believe to that in a certain degree, but we always wanted to run a business at Postmates that can show to an investor that we have a very healthy gross profit margin.
You make money on every transaction?
We do. We will be profitable in 2017. We make money on every delivery that we do. And
is it the real profitability, or is it like the kind of profitability in New York, in Soho, I'm profitable?
Oh, well, yes.
That was a joke, by the way.
From the 40 markets that we're in, 20 of them generate revenues for the company.
Okay.
Keep in mind, we launched 23 last year. So that is a high number of markets. And we looked at money ever since we started the company. But more importantly, we try to manage a business that you can show that you can return a profit at some point. Because I fundamentally just don't believe in never caring about this, and then finally you've been confronted with the challenge, how do I get 20% gross profit margin? Because only if I can do that, I can have a profitable business. So
it's your ethos,
if right now the conditions are cooling down, then I'm personally fine with that. But everything goes in cycles. So for some time now, startups were a bit overvalued, or some startups were a bit overvalued. And now we're going through a cycle where things are cooling down a bit. I think overall, it's probably not a bad idea. I mean, is it better to cool things down a little bit, or to just let them pop in 2 or 3 years? And then everybody is running around and is sad. And so I think a cooling off period is probably a smart thing to do.
I agree with that. Marc, any views?
I agree.
Capital,
I think
capital.
Things will, it is a good discipline for companies to focus on improving unit economics, to be careful with the money they've raised. All of our companies have raised enough money to sustain the next 2-3 years without making any compromises to growth or internationalization. I think it only helps to make your company stronger. Probably some competitors will leave the field, and it helps you focus the company on operational excellence. Because I'm sorry, I'm coming back to that point, but delivery, a logistics company, and we have built already with Zalando and La Moda, our Russian Zalando and other e-commerce businesses, we always have built the e-commerce business and underneath a complete new logistics business, especially in markets like Russia or Southeast Asia or Latin America, where there were no existing logistics companies you could rely on. So focusing on the operational excellence in this business, like in all of our businesses, but especially in the logistics businesses, is key. And otherwise it breaks you. And so this time is a good time. At the same time, I don't believe it's a dip, but at the same time, I don't believe it's going to be the next financial crisis.
No, it won't.
Yeah, I agree. But you know what? I'm looking forward to being able to ask a question on unit economics and not apologizing for it. So let's see, the world is going to change. I have one final question before we finish here, which is really around your entrepreneurial journeys. You were here, Germany, and you moved how many years ago to the US?
Well, I lived in the UK for 5 years before I moved to the US. So I left Germany, I think, 11 years ago.
Okay, but you left Europe, you went to the US, you started this business from scratch. Touch wood, it's a great success story, and hopefully it's only the beginning. Marc, you started a long time ago in the US, you came back, Alando, eBay, Jamba, Rocket, lots of other businesses now. Tell us a little bit about how different these entrepreneurial stories might have been. Any regrets, Marc? Anything you would have done differently besides wanting to target and kill US companies from the get-go?
No regrets at all. I mean, I love the US, and I love to build businesses there. I think it's the best marketplace for entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, and the best place to start a business, because you have a huge market and you have an environment where people support you when you start a new business, even the first time.
Not if you're German, it seems. It takes time.
It seems maybe a little
All
bit
good things
tougher,
take time,
but
right?
I think the US, I mean, the truth is the US has, for one idea or one product, the US has 1,000 entrepreneurs following it, trying it. And in Europe, and nailing it down to Germany, it's maybe 2. And that is the ratio, and we can talk a lot about what the governments have to do and what the investor community could do, and that there should be more funding, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, all of that is necessary, and we have great universities, et cetera. But what we need is 1,000 entrepreneurs for one idea instead of just 1 or 2 trying it.
Bastian, any thoughts? You went over, you're there for the foreseeable future.
In the US?
Yeah. Well, you're building a business over there.
Oh, I mean, I have nothing to complain. A lot of things that I didn't like and that I struggled with in Europe are actually different in the US. But I mean,
like what?
Well, I mean, it's the same old discussion. I mean, you have this on like every other panel, right? Why is it easier to raise money in the US?
But I don't have you on every other panel.
Well, you know, I'll give it to you. I give you my 40 seconds. Number one, that's probably known. I think the biggest difference between the Valley and here is that I see a lack of successful entrepreneurs giving back to the community, heavily investing. So, and I don't know why that is. I think obviously we have someone here who's done it differently. If so, was a very distinct style, you know. But
why do you think it is?
No,
we won't talk about the style.
There's a second one. There's a second point. So that's the first one.
Okay, but that is an important point.
That's a very German one. There's 3 in total. The German one is that there is. We don't really like the winners that much, right? The Germans are a little bit. I don't know if it's envy, but it's a little bit this. If you go to someone and you tell them you're a deer, you know, someone gives you 150 reasons why this doesn't work. So. Of course, it's like, you know, we have this saying in Germany, Schuster, bleib bei deinen Leisten, which is kind of like stick to what you're good at. And I'm afraid this often blocks beautiful ideas. Because here's the thing about a crazy idea, right? If you have this idea and it's like young and it's tiny and it's small, you can like destroy that with like a couple of harsh sentences.
Yeah.
The Americans, I believe, have a tendency to look at that same guy, but instead of saying, this is all going to be complete garbage,
there's something in there.
You know what? The guy's a little bit a crazy person.
Yeah.
But what if that shit works out?
Yeah.
And that's what they run for. It's I like that.
It's the ultimate meritocracy. On that note, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Sonali.
much.
Thank you.